Greetings. Today is 3/1/2019, and I'm coming to you with a critical, pertinent update concerning the Passover pilgrimage. The other night, I was contemplating a scripture, Matthew 24, verse 44. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. So I was meditating on that, contemplating it, pondering it, thinking that when most people think he's coming, it's not when he's going to come. And as I was contemplating it, and a few other scriptures, the Spirit of the Messiah just started giving me a massive download of information. So much that I'm actually, to this point, a couple days later, I'm still awestruck. Because he showed me the exact day, and frankly, the hour of when the first rapture occurs, the Passover pilgrimage. So, since I know most people's attention spans don't go past 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to give you the answer right away, right up front, and then I'll lay out a foundation of the whole package concerning the raptures. So, the first rapture, which, if you guys have seen any of my past videos, I refer to as the Passover pilgrimage, because the 3 pilgrimage feasts are foreshadows. They were dress rehearsals for the 3 main harvest raptures. Okay. Here's the timeline. And I have here for 2019 the Passover pilgrimage occurring in sometime between March 20th, no later than April 11th, because after April 11th, or excuse me, after May 11th, the state of Israel, which is the most blatant physical sign here on earth, they will become 71 years old. And that's one of the indicators, one of the anchors that tie down to spring of 2019. But after that moment, then it can't be in 2019. But since I got this new information from the Messiah that's been staring us in the face for the past 500 years, since we had Bibles to read for ourselves, this all changes, because it becomes one day now. The exact day is known. Okay, so the day of the first rapture, the Passover pilgrimage, will be on the evening of the 15th day of the first month at sunset, while it's turning into the 16th day of the first month, Jerusalem time, because Jerusalem, of course, will be in sync with New Jerusalem. All right? And I will explain why. that the first rapture will occur the evening of the 15th day of the first month, turning into the 16th day. So the 16th day of the first month is when the rapture, the first harvest, the barley harvest, will occur. All right? And what it's talking about is the first fruits of the barley ceremony. Okay? So here, we'll use the Torah calendar here as an example. So Passover would be on the 14th day of the first month at the evening is when you eat the Passover meal. And then Passover day 1, which is also the day of preparation for unleavened bread, is the 15th day of the first month. And then it's also a high Sabbath. So the ceremony for the first fruits, the wave sheaf offering, is a picture of the first rapture of the Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgin, the wise servants. Okay? Which is right here, the Passover pilgrimage. So what happens is on the evening of the 15th of the first month, entering into the 16th, which is Passover day 1, entering into Passover day 2, 3 Sanhedrin, who were chosen specifically to reap the barley, 3 Sanhedrin would exit the temple to go cut the first fruit of the barley harvest. Now, it was actually more ceremonial because the bundles of barley were already pre-prepared. So really all they had to do was go out and get it. But it's the ceremony, it's the process that is a dress rehearsal for the future fulfillment. And the future fulfillment is actually the angels coming to remove the Church of Philadelphia from the trial. Okay? So, when the 3 Sanhedrin exited the temple, and this is a picture of the open door in heaven of Matthew 25:10, Revelation 3:8, Revelation 4:1, which is what I've been telling you guys for months now, that these are the same, all the same open door, and it's the open door to remove the Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the wise servants. Okay? So when the Sanhedrin exited the temple to get the first fruits of the barley, as the sun was setting, they would ask the crowd, because this is a ceremonial celebration here, has the sun set? And they would respond, yes. With this sickle? Yes. Into this basket? Yes. On this Sabbath? Yes. Shall I reap? Yes. And then they would get the bundles of prepared barley and bring them into the temple. Okay? Did you get that? They brought the first fruits of the barley into the temple. And this is all a picture of the open door in heaven of Revelation 4:1. So right here in Revelation 3:8, which is the Church of Philadelphia, and this open door is the same open door for the wise virgins in Matthew 10. So the Messiah says, I know your works, your deeds. Behold, I've set before thee an open door. Why? Because you kept the word of my patience. I will keep you from the hour of trial, temptation. I come quickly. Hold fast so that no one steals your crown. And if you overcome, I'll make you a pillar in the temple of the Almighty, which is New Jerusalem. Well, the temple's in New Jerusalem. Okay? So here it is. An open door in heaven. Come up hither. Behold, I was before a throne in heaven, and one sat on the throne. Okay? What I just read is this is a picture of that. Okay? And when the first fruits are taken into the temple, they're threshed, parched, winnowed, milled, and then sifted into fine flour. And right here, this is a picture of the wise virgins being transformed from a body of flesh into their redeemed body. Okay? Oh, I also forgot to mention that the bundles of barley prepared is a picture of the Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the wise servants having their proper attire, which is their wedding gear, aka keeping the word of his patience. They kept the commandments of the Father and faith in the Son. All right, that is them being prepared. Okay. So this transformation is occurring on the 16th day of the first month. And here on earth, the priest would have brought the first fruits of the barley into the temple, threshed it, parched it, winnowed it, milled it, sifted into fine flour, and then they would have taken 1 omer of barley, mixed it with olive oil and frankincense, and then I believe they burnt it on the altar as a sweet smelling aroma to the Almighty. And this was basically the morning of the 16th day of the first month. The first fruits were presented to the Almighty. Okay? So, the reaping occurred while the sun was setting on the evening of the 15th, entering into the 16th day. The rapture occurs. And the transformation from a flesh into a spiritual body, and then on the 16th day, the first fruits were presented in the temple, at the throne, to the Almighty, which is Revelation 4, 2-4. So the open door is the rapture, is the reaping by the angels. Come up hither. That's it right there. The Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the wise servants, are transformed from a flesh to a spiritual body. And then they are presented to the Almighty. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white, crowns of gold on their heads. Okay? So this is the wise virgins, the Church of Philadelphia, the wise servants, who are the elders. Elders means mature. Wise, that's what elder means. Presented to the Almighty. And this verse 4 is a picture of the fulfillment of what the Messiah promised to the Church of Philadelphia. Because you kept the word of my patience. And then they're seen, the fulfillment. They have their crown of gold, which they're the only ones who have crowns of gold. And then they're sitting on thrones, pillars in the temple. Pillar is a strong position. It helps to hold up the foundation. All right? So right here is a fulfillment of what the Messiah promised the Church of Philadelphia. Okay? Then the priest would wave the first fruits before the Almighty. And then after that, the individual male Israelites who made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the Passover to present themselves before the Almighty, which was required, and what they would bring with them, and this would occur on the 16th day of the first month. They already made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the Passover, so they're already there. Now they have their sacrificial lamb, which is separate from the Passover lamb. Okay? Then they take that to the temple with their first fruits of their personal crop. All right? This is for the nation, and then this is on a personal level. Okay? But this is painting part of the picture of the main harvest here. Or I should say of the first fruit ceremony representing the Church of Philadelphia. And the reason why I'm saying that is they go to the temple with their sacrificial lamb. All right? And then we see this in Revelation 5:6. So Revelation 4:1 is the rapture, the transformation from the physical into the spirit. Immediately I was in the spirit. Then they're presented before the throne of the Almighty. Okay, I seen a throne was set in heaven, and one that sat upon him, the Almighty. And then we see the elders presented around the throne of the Almighty on their thrones with crowns, clothed in white raiment, because they are the first fruits. They're the first to be ripe out of the believers. First to be ripe. They're the first ones to mature. Okay? And then we go over to chapter 5. And then we see the sacrificial lamb. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne, at the temple, in the midst of the throne, next to the Almighty, and the four beasts, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as it had been slain. So there it is. You have the first fruits, which are the elders, the barley harvest, the believers who matured first in the growing season, with the lamb being presented at the throne. There it is. And this all occurs prior to the seals being opened. Meaning the elders, the Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the wise servants are removed prior to the trial. And it's all, the fulfillment is all here, right in chapters 4 and 5 of Revelation. And it's all been shown to us in the ceremony of the first fruits. The first fruits of the barley. So the first fruits of the first crop of the main harvest of the ancient Israelites, which is the first pilgrimage feast, Passover. There it is. It's all right there. Exact day and hour. Now, I struggled with this because I was one of them for the longest time that didn't think we could know the day because of Matthew 24. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But then when the Messiah showed me that the day and hour are right here in His Word, I struggled with it for a couple days. Okay, because so He shall send His angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and this is the last trumpet for the final war preparation. The final war preparation is the gathering of all believers, those that are dead in the Messiah, and those that remain because they missed the first harvest. They weren't ripe at the first fruits of the barley. So this big gigantic gathering, which is the largest gathering, is a war preparation before the war in heaven. Okay? Now learn the parable of the fig tree. When its branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So this is why I thought that we could only know the season. But this is speaking about this. Summertime is the Pentecost pilgrimage, the wheat. And this is the wheat harvest right here. Okay? So summer pertaining to the wheat harvest is nigh. When you see these things happening right before the gathering, you know that it's near. this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. And this is hearkening back to Psalm 90. Because in Psalm 90, we see the days of our life contain 70 years. And that's where the physical earthly sign that everybody on planet Earth knows about, Israel, the state of Israel, and I believe that's why it was called Israel and not Judah, to be as a physical earthly sign. They contain 70 years. All right? Or due to strength, 80 years. But the 70 to 80 will be labor and sorrow. And then they fly away, which is a picture of the rapture of the 144,000 and the new believers that they win to the Messiah. Okay, but my point is that before the 80 years is over, that's what this is referring to. This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So all the seals, because that's what the Messiah was giving us up here, the seals and the mark of the beast, all that will be fulfilled before the that generation passes. He says, but of that day and hour no man knoweth, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Okay, and that's why I was struggling with this. But so as in the days of Noah, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So if the Messiah right here is talking about heaven and earth passing away, well then okay. But I always thought that because right afterwards it talks about the coming of the Son of Man, that it's talking about the coming. The beginning of the coming. But obviously I was wrong, because we know the day. So either this is talking about heaven and earth passing away, which is basically saying we won't know when the 1,000 years, or I should say the release of the horns of the dragon occur. We don't know that day. Or he's just saying at this point in time, when he was given this explanation of the future, that no one knows. But then he went to heaven, because at this point he's a man on earth. Okay, but then he went to heaven, is at the right hand of the Father, and then gives the revelation to John. And that's when he reveals it. I'm not 100% certain on what it is, but all I know is that we do know the day. Okay, for as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage until Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Two shall be in the field, one taken and the other left. Okay. Here it is now. Okay? So he says, watch, therefore, for ye know not what hour your master comes. All right? But then he says, but know this, if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken into. All right? Then he goes on to say, therefore, be ye ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Okay? So now I believe right here, he's talking to the whole of believers. But he's pointing out the wise virgins, the wise servants, the church of Philadelphia. If the good man had known, he would have watched. Okay? And this is why I believe it's talking to the whole, and then it transitions into the wise virgins, the church of Philadelphia. Because he says, who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season, which means at the proper time. So he's saying, who is the wise virgin who the master gives knowledge to, understanding, insight, to feed the household, the house of the Almighty, the church, meat at the proper time? So when is the proper time? Now. Now is the proper time because it's upon us. Then he says, blessed is that servant whom his master, when he cometh, shall find so doing. So blessed is the wise servant, the faithful and wise servant, who is feeding the church at the proper time. And when he cometh, when he finds that servant doing that, he shall make him ruler. And this is a reference to the wise servant, the wise virgin, the church of Philadelphia. It's a reference to their crown and pillar. And the fulfillment is shown in Revelation 4:4, which is the elders with their crowns and on their thrones. All right? And then he shows the contradiction, the opposite side, talking about the evil servant, who's saying that the master is delaying his coming and smites his fellow servants, and eats and drinks with the drunken. The master shall come in a day when he looketh not, and in an hour that he is not aware. So the fact right here that the Messiah is showing the contradiction and showing that the evil servant doesn't know the day nor the hour. where the wise and faithful servant knows and feeds it to the house at the proper time. Okay? And then here's some confirmations of, because like I said, I was struggling with knowing the day and hour. It took me off guard, basically, when Messiah was downloading this information to me. I was struggling with it. So Amos 3, surely the Almighty will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants. Who then is the faithful and wise servant? Okay? And then, so this is the Old Testament. And then in the New Testament, the Messiah basically says the same thing. Fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. So both is saying basically the same exact thing. One in the Old Testament and one in the New Testament. All right? Now so the timeline, the 14-year timeline. Okay? Or I should say the 3 pilgrimage feasts. All right? They represent the growing season. All right? And the growing season, the first crop to be ripe is the barley, which is in the spring. And the next crop to be ripe is the wheat, which is summer. And then the final crop to be ripe, main harvest, is the grapes, and that's basically fall. So we got spring, summer, fall, and it's all during the growing season, and it's pointing to when they're ripe, when they're ready to be reaped, when they're mature. Okay, that's what it's all pointing to. It's all painting a picture for the raptures. Okay, now the 144,000 is like a separate rapture. Okay, but the 3 main harvests, so there's 4 total raptures, but 3 of them are the main harvests, and it's the pilgrimage feasts that are dress rehearsals, foreshadows, explaining to us the process of how it's going to occur. All right? And like I said, what I'm trying to emphasize here is the growing season is a figure, or a picture of when believers are ripe, mature, to be harvested. Okay? The Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the wise servants are the first ones that are mature, that are ripe. They're the first ones to be harvested. And they're the only ones that are removed prior to the trial. The trial is the 7 years of seals. Okay? And also, after the first fruits of the barley, it begins the festival of weeks. All right? Which is 7 sevens. And what happens? How long is the trial? A week. 7 years. All right? And then after the trial, the week, is the Jubilee Festival, which is the Pentecost pilgrimage, which is the wheat harvest. And that's when all believers are removed. Okay? The Jubilee feast is what is referred to as. Okay, and even how the crops are processed is even a picture of believers. Okay, the barley, its chaff is easily removed just from winnowing. All right, it's thrown up into the air, and the wind separates the chaff from the barley, which is a picture of the Holy Spirit easily working through the wise servants. The wise virgins, okay? Then those that remain, because they missed the first rapture, they remain because they're not ripe, they're not mature. They represent the wheat, and the wheat is more difficult to get the chaff off. It has to be threshed, and the board that the ancients used to thresh it was the tribulum board. Okay, and they had to crack off the chaff to separate it from the wheat. All right. Now, for the grapes, and because at the time of the seventh seal, when the Messiah and the Father are here in New Jerusalem, right outside of our atmosphere, on top of the clouds of heaven, the grapes, they were not believers at this time, so they were unbelievers at the coming of the Messiah. All right. And that's why they are present during the first 3.5 years of the wrath of the Lamb, the trumpets. They were unbelievers in the beginning, but they received the testimony of the 144,000 and become believers during this difficult time of when the beasts are running amok on what's left of the earth. But because they are stuck in here, because they were unbelievers, they have to be crushed. And the crushing is a picture of the mark. The beast set up the mark. The 144,000 are the first to offer themselves up to refuse it. As an example, the beasts kill them. They lie dead for 3 days, and then they're raptured up to heaven, New Jerusalem. All right. And then for the next 42 days, the beasts seize, imprison, and torture the new believers. And this 42 days is when the true believers show their colors, and those who just joined out of curiosity are separated because they end up taking the mark because they fear for their life or whatever reason. They're not true believers. But this 42 days of hard times is what separates the true believers from not. And this is them being crushed because the beasts kill all who refuse the mark. And this is the final separation of flesh. Because right after this point in time, all humans alive on planet Earth are wicked. They took the mark, they're idolatrous, they're wicked, and then this is what becomes Babylon the Great after the mark. All right. So I wrote down some things here, just explaining why I believe, just touching the surface of why I believe 2019 is the strongest, really the only year that everything can be in proper alignment. All right. The 69th week is about to end, and the 70th week is about to begin. 1536 AD, when Suleiman started to restore the walls, and then he called again the Jews back to Jerusalem. 2 fulfillments in that same year. He made the decree in 1535, but the construction started in 1536, and 1536 is also when he was sending out word for the Jews to come back to Jerusalem because he's restoring it. All right. So then 1536 plus 483 years, which is 69 weeks, equals 2019. And then in Daniel 9, after the 69 weeks, is the anointed ruler. So here in March, when it turns over to the new year, is anytime after that is when we should expect to see the anointed ruler. Okay. And in the 70th year is right now, and it ends on 5/12/2019. Then after that, it'll be 71. And like I said before, in Psalm 90, from 71 to 80 is the hard times, the labor and sorrow. So the 70th is when the removal of the wise virgins should occur, because after that is the hard time, the labor, and the sorrow. Okay. And then I believe the crucifixion and the ascension, the resurrection and ascension occurred in 33 AD, and I showed in past videos that there's several witnesses that agree to that. And then you add 2,000 years, and then you subtract 14 years, which is the appointed final end time, the 14 years, 7 years of the trial and 7 years of the wrath. And you can get this by adding together Psalm 90 and Revelation 12, because in Psalm 90 it shows that after the 10 years of labor and sorrow, soon after that, they fly away. And then in Revelation 12, you see when they fly away, which is a picture of the rapture of the 144,000 and the new believers, that after they fly away, there's another 3.5 years. And then Revelation 8 shows us when the 7th seal opens, it's at the halfway marker of the appointed time. And since we know that the wrath is 7 years after that, then the seals have to be 7 years. So we have the 14-year timeline, the 2,000 years, the 70th year, the 70th week, and then just the other day, there was a peace and security summit for the Middle East. 1 Thessalonians 5:3 is the only time safety is mentioned in the New Testament. And it says, when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. And as I explained in a past video, sudden destruction is in reference to the Messiah coming quickly like a thief. And then all who dwell on earth after that are caught in the trap. And it specifies who dwell on earth because the wise virgins, the wise servants, the Church of Philadelphia were removed prior to that. So this Peace and Security Summit happens to come a month prior to the start of the 70th week. Is that a coincidence? All right. Now, peace and security, peace and safety, it's been mentioned in speeches and stuff like that many times. But as far as I'm aware, this was the first summit, and it's titled Peace and Security Summit for the Middle East. All right, and it happens to be a month before the 70th week starts. And then, as we know in Daniel 9, the 70 weeks are appointed to the anointed, because at the end of the 70 weeks, the anointed is removed, which would be 2026, and that is right here, because technically the anointed aren't removed until the Pentecost pilgrimage, the wheat harvest. That's when all the anointed is removed, dead and alive. All right. Now, something I wanted to point out, and I believe it goes along with Matthew 24 when the Messiah is explaining all this. He says, all right, to watch, for you know not what hour your master comes. And he says, be ready, because in an hour, because when the master comes, it's going to be at an hour that you don't think it is. All right? So watch, because you don't know the hour. And he's going to come when you're not thinking of it. All right? And I believe the reason for this is that if you see all the confusion out there concerning the rapture, I mean, there's people posting videos sometimes multiple times in one day saying the rapture's any day now, and the rapture's on the Feast of Trumpets, and there's just so much confusion out there. And that's why I believe he's saying these two things. For the people that are saying the rapture's on the Feast of Trumpets, or the rapture's on Hanukkah, or whatever other new trend is out there, they're not going to know the true timing of the first rapture. Okay? They'll be looking towards trumpets, they'll be looking towards Hanukkah, they'll be looking towards Pentecost, and some people are trying to say that there's two Pentecosts, that there's a 49 days and then there's a 50 days with a total of 99 days, which isn't true, because Pentecost, it's shown in the when the ancient Israelites left Egypt, from the time they exited Egypt from the Passover until the time that they met the Almighty on Mount Sinai, was 50 days. And that's a picture of the Pentecost. So it's not 99 days like some people are saying, that there's a Feast of Weeks and then you add another 50 and and that's the Pentecost. No, the Feast of Weeks, it's celebrating the 7 sevens, and then on the 50th day they celebrate which is what we call the Pentecost, the 50th days, which is the Jubilee feast. Okay? So my point is that there's so much confusion out there that people, a majority of believers, don't understand the order of events of the feasts that the Messiah is showing us. All right? And then, so he says, you don't watch because you don't know the hour. Be ready because he's going to come when you don't think. And then he's down here, it's blessed is a servant when the master comes, he's doing the right thing. All right? And here's another reason why I believe people will be off. Is because, okay, now we know the day. The day of the first rapture is the 15th day of the first month going into the 16th day of the first month. Period. There's no question to it. I'm 100% certain of that, all right? The scriptures are showing us loud and clear. But now we come to the point where, so when is the 15th day of the first month? And my point is that there's multiple people out there pointing to multiple different calendars, and so there ties in even more confusion. So we're confused about the feasts, we're confused about the calendars, we're confused about if there's a rapture or if there isn't, if there's multiple raptures. And so there's people out there that use the Enoch calendar, and they're saying the first day of the month of the first month is the 17th of March, and the Passover is 3/31. And then there's multiple Enoch calendars out there. And then the rabbinic calendar is stating the first day of the first month is the 5th of April, putting the Passover at 5/19. And then the Torah calendar and Refiner's Fire have the first day of the first month as the 9th of March, and Passover is 3/21. Now, I personally agree with the Torah calendar and the Refiner's Fire. And the Refiner's Fire refers to this book concerning the ancient biblical calendar and how they got the new year. Because prior to Egypt, the ancient Israelites went by the ways of the Egyptians. Because if you remember, the ancient Israelites were actually celebrities in Egypt because of Joseph. All right? If it wasn't for Joseph, I should say, if it wasn't for the Almighty putting Joseph in the position and the Almighty influencing the Pharaoh to receive Joseph, if it wasn't for all that, that 7-year famine would have destroyed Egypt, and Egypt would have been a blank memory. There's no way they would have been able to absorb that famine. And even if you look at what the scriptures say about the surrounding areas, that they were all coming to Egypt because of how severe the famine was. All right, we're talking about a famine in a place that's basically a desert. There's no way the Egyptian Empire, the Egyptian kingdom would have continued if it wasn't for the Almighty putting Joseph and the Pharaoh together. And, you know, we could say what we want to say about Egypt, but they had a very highly civilized society at the time of Joseph. very civilized, very prosperous, and the fact that the Pharaoh recognized Joseph for who he was, it points to their greatness. I mean, I believe the Almighty had Joseph go there and go into prison and all that for purposes. You know, when he was a kid, Abraham favored him, taught him all the book knowledge. And then the Almighty had to get him into Egypt, so he allowed him to be sold into slavery. Then he was in Egypt. He allowed them to be thrown into jail to harden him up. Because as a kid, as a youth, you know, he was a bookworm. So then when he gets to Egypt, the Almighty allows him to go to prison to get hardened up. You know, we're talking slave labor here in ancient prisons. And then it also showed him how to manage, because the prison people seen how he was a good worker and promoted him. And all that got him into the position to be able to interpret the dreams. And then when the time came and he met with Pharaoh and he interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and he told the Pharaoh that he's been blessed by the Almighty to be shown this warning. And then he told the Pharaoh that you need to get somebody to get prepared for this coming famine. And then the Pharaoh was wise to see that Joseph was the man for the job, and promoted him to be second in command of ancient Egypt, only second to the Pharaoh himself. All right. So my point in saying all that is that the ancient Israelites were celebrities in Egypt for hundreds of years, up until, I guess it was Ramses or whatever, the Pharaoh that knew not of Joseph, whether he didn't know him or just ignored the fact of what he did or whatever. But they ended up fearing the Hebrews or the ancient Israelites, because they were so prosperous and strong and etc. And then that's when he started enslaving them real bad. But anyway, my point is that prior to that, they did the ways of the Egyptians. And that was one of the things that the Pharaoh was bumping heads with Moses with. Is Moses was saying that the Almighty's telling us to go out into the wilderness to make a sacrifice to him. And the Pharaoh was saying, I'm not letting you go. That was one of the things that started the whole thing. But anyway, so the ancient Israelites, while they're in Egypt, the Egyptian New Year was in the summertime when the Nile would flood. However, they still harvested barley. And that's why at the time when the Almighty gave the ancient Israelites his calendar, they already knew how to determine the growing season for the barley. And they did it with 3 celestial signs. And that's what this person uses, and the refiner's fire who refers to this. They use that, and I agree with it. So I believe this one is correct. The Torah calendar and the refiner's fire, they're in sync. And they have the first day of the first month as the first new moon that's closest to the spring equinox, so as long as the Passover falls after the spring equinox. And for this year, that's what occurs. Let's see. Right here, see, we have the spring equinox right here. So the new moon that's closest to that is this one. So that makes this day 1. So the ancients, they had this extremely precise formula to figure out when the spring equinox was. The spring equinox. And then after the Almighty gave the ancient Israelites the new calendar with Passover, they already knew how to determine this from their knowledge from Egypt, all right, and other, because determining all this was all done by the stars and by the ancients, and that's why they had highly intelligent, skilled people that did this, because it all, the growing seasons depended upon the seasons and the times. So they couldn't get this stuff wrong, because it would mean the destruction of their way of life. You have one bad growing season because somebody miscalculated the date and they were 2 weeks off or whatever. It throws the whole system off. So the people that they had watching the stars, the astronomers, they were the best of the best, the smartest of the smartest, right-hand men to the king and to the pharaohs, etc. So, like I said, I agree with the Torah calendar this year, and that the refiner's fire is in sync with it. But there's one last thing I want to point out, and I'm not saying this to scare people or to rain on the parade, but the first rapture, the removal of the Church of Philadelphia, the wise virgins, the wise servants, which are the elders of Revelation, it's only a very small portion of believers. Okay? Most people listening or watching this video are not going to make the first rapture. I'm not saying that. I don't delight in saying that. It's just the way it is. And there's still hope after that. But I'm just being real. Most believers aren't going to make the first rapture. All right? And see, in Revelation 19:7, after the process of the three main harvests, then the bride made herself ready. So the wise virgins are ready at the first growing season harvest, the barley. Those that remain, or the foolish virgins, so to speak, they're not ready until the wheat harvest. And then the grapes that have to be crushed aren't ready until they have to face the mark of the beast. But after that process, that's when the bride hath made herself ready. So this is all a process of the bride being made ready. Now currently there are 2.4 billion Christians in the world today at this moment, approximately. 1.3 billion are Catholics, 960 million Protestants, 260 million Eastern Orthodox, 80 million Oriental Orthodox. These are the main branches right here. Okay. Now, of the 960 million Protestants, approximately half consider themselves born again / evangelical. Born again, evangelical are basically hand in hand. But my point is that when the Messiah gives the parable about the 10 virgins, all right, I believe he used the number 10 as a representation of 10% of Christianity. Why do I say that? Because a virgin is not idolatrous. Okay? A harlot is idolatrous. Right? That's what Scripture's talking about when it says virgin and harlot. A virgin means they are only worshiping the Messiah. A harlot means they are worshiping a false god. All right? And the mother of harlots, Babylon the Great, which occurs after the mark, it's the mother of harlots because after that mark, in that point in time, everyone alive on planet Earth is idolatrous because they took the mark and they worship the beasts. Period. Okay, but my point is that the virgin is not idolatrous. So they're only worshiping the Messiah, these 10 virgins. Okay? They're virgins, they're not idolatrous. So if they're only worshiping the Messiah, that means they made the adulted decision to give their lives to the Messiah. Meaning they're born again, sealed by the Holy Spirit for the day of redemption. That's what virgin means right there. Okay? The fact that they have a burning lamp, a burning torch in their hand, means that they are in the Word. Your Word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. Okay? So they're born again, and they're in the Word. And then it goes on to say that they're watching and waiting for the Messiah. Now, how many people do you know fulfill that checklist right there? Okay, I don't know many. And that's why I believe that the 10 represents 10%. So if you have 10% of the 2.4 billion Christians, that would be 240 million. All right. Now, if we just went by people who consider themselves born again evangelical, then it's 550 million. Okay. But my whole point to all this is that only half of these people are considered the wise virgins, the wise servants, the Church of Philadelphia. Because even if you know someone who's given their life to the Messiah and they're not idolatrous, they're born again, they're sealed by the Holy Spirit, are they in the Word? Are they watching and waiting? You know, this is a strict checklist right here. And yet half of them are still considered foolish. All right, and I just wanted to emphasize that so that you're not caught unaware if you miss it. And to hold on to hope, you just got to toughen out with the Messiah, because of course he's going to be with you. That's why it says don't hurt the oil and the wine, because that's representing believers. So yes, this will be a trial, but of course he's faithful and just, and will finish the good work he started in you. All right. I hope I touched on everything, but if not, I'm going to be doing another video here soon. While I was contemplating them scriptures, I was also contemplating some scriptures concerning the enemy video I did, and once again the Messiah was downloading major knowledge to questions on that too. So when I do the trumpets video for the trumpets, I'm going to touch on the questions I had concerning the enemy. Alright, so till next time, take care, and I hope this helps a lot.